Hi, I'm Glenn Parry. I'm joined by my co-author, Dr. Ellen Hughes.
Hello.
We're just going to talk a little bit about our new book, Migration, Mobility and the Creative Class. It's fundamentally based on Ellen's PhD work, which grew from a project we did together called Bristol and Bath by Design, which before that grew out of Brighton Hughes. These were all studying the creative class and how they influence cities, what it is to be a creative and to be a designer. So within the book, within your PhD, I wonder if you'd like to explain a little bit about the thesis of the book. What do we actually learn?
Okay, so when we're thinking about the migration and mobility of creative workers, kind of dominant theory, which comes from Richard Florida, is that creative workers are really highly mobile and that they move to places which are going to cater for their sort of their tastes in things like theatre, music, art galleries. So if you put those amenities into a city, then creative workers will move there, and then you're going to get growth in your city, economic growth.
But previous works challenged that thesis, hasn't it?
There has been, so there's been lots of work which has really challenged the whole creative class thesis, but there has been very little work actually looking at the migration of creative class. So this idea is that they're highly mobile and they can and they will move to cities kind of at will. So somewhere they get somewhere and it doesn't suit them, they're just going to go off to the next city, and they're highly mobile, they're just going to keep going. So you've got to really work hard to catch them. So this really interested me, and I talked to people, went and interviewed people about their migration trajectories right from childhood all the way through their life course.
And you did different generations, it wasn't just a certain age group?
So I interviewed designers really across a broad spectrum of types of design company and design occupations, and they were of different generations. So some of them were like directors of companies that have been in Bristol since the 1970s, for example, and others were just recently left university. So they're of all different ages, yeah.
So a cross-generational study.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the different sorts of artists, creative designers, because I think that's really fascinating.
Okay, so some of them were working in aerospace and engineering, submarine design, so I was going and interviewing them within their sort of engineering offices, where there'd be lots of big models everywhere, lots of hustle and bustle, or going into architectural offices as well. And then maybe the next day or in that afternoon, I was then going to somebody's bedsit and sitting on their bedroom floor as they were doing illustration from their bedroom. So it was a real range of types of people that I was interviewing.
Okay, so the book's mobility in the creative class, so this group of people that Floridian thinking would suggest terribly mobile, as a challenge that. What's new? What's the new idea about the mobility of this group in your work?
Well, really, when you look at their migration patterns over a period of time, what I found is that creative people don't migrate in any different way to the normal population. So the literature tells us that the general population in the UK is actually not very mobile. We move quite a bit in childhood, settle down for a long period during school, make a few movements until you form couples and new families are formed, and then there's a long period of living in one place before a bit of change of mobility in old age.
So actually they're not super mobile, they're pretty much like other people. Yeah. Is there anything that makes them special? Why do people try and attract them to their cities?
So Florida's idea is that if you have creative people in your city, then high-tech companies will want to be located near to them, and that causes urban growth. So it's all really very much city-based idea of economic growth. So that was, for policymakers, that was the big attractor.
And that's still very much what we see today, even though it's been challenged quite significantly through the literature.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this idea has really been, but there has been some resistance to it and some evidence showing it doesn't work very well, but it's still the predominant idea.
Because we've seen when we've been to talks, models of cafes and open plan, and we're going to have a theatre here and build it and they will come, and sitting there despairing in the audience. So what is it about their what have you heard in terms of this migration pattern of this creative class? Because assuming we do want them in the city because they bring certain energy.
I'm sure that you want creative workers just as much as you want all types of workers within a city. And what is defined as creative work is also a bit of a fuzzy concept anyway. So who's to say that a midwife isn't creative? This idea that there is a certain type of creative worker is a bit of a myth anyway.
So difficult to define this group. But given that we've defined it broadly in terms of designers, what is it about the mobility of designers that's similar or different? What is this migration?
Okay, so what within the literature there are two main arguments. One is the traditional migration idea, which is theory, which is that people migrate for jobs. And the other one is that creative workers migrate for amenities. And most of the literature is saying which one is it? Is it one or the other? And most studies only look at migrants sort of one move from one city to another city to understand what that migration is. And what we did was we looked at migration right from birth all the way through the creative worker's life.
And I think what was interesting in your study, just holding with that thought, is a lot of studies look at 6 months after university. And yeah, people are very mobile then. But you looked throughout their lives.
Yes.
And this was multi-generation, so yeah, people who just left uni, but who was the oldest person you?
Probably in their late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. So right from the sort of baby boomer generation through to people who've just left university. And when you look at those patterns, what I really discovered was that the underlying driver of those migration trajectories wasn't really jobs or amenities, but it was about social class and it was about family. And very often people's early life experiences were shaping their migration trajectories in later life.
Okay, so their life influences where they choose to live. What particularly is it that attracts them to a city like Bristol?
Well, a lot of so there were three types of creative worker, I would say, in terms of their migration types. So one was people who have lived here all of their lives. They'd never lived anywhere else, they never wanted to live anywhere else, and they weren't missing that migration. So they were born here. Often these were people from a working class background, in fact always. There were other people that came here for university and stayed. There are other people who moved because there was something about Bristol that they were felt familiar to them, something that was similar to the place that they themselves grew up. So when they came here, they felt it was a very familiar milieu and they felt comfortable here. Also, a lot of people had family members living nearby. So there'd be lots of social connections that were keeping people and attracting them to the city. Okay,
so Bristol's known as a creative hub, and yet from what you're saying, a lot of that is serendipitous. But in particular, if you were at another city looking at this model, looking at your work, what are the things that you could do to create such a vibrant city again?
Well, the things that are underpinning Bristol is a very strong investment over time in the industries that are there. And within Bristol, they happen to be quite creative industries. So we have aerospace, we have the BBC that's been there for a long time. We also have a high-tech sector, which was heavily invested in the 1970s. And we have two universities. So that deep injection of central government spending over a long period of time. But then when we're thinking about attracting people to a place or keeping them in the place, the things that people really, really are interested in are being close to their family. A lot of people end up, if they move away from their family or place of origin, they often want to come back towards it when they can over the course of their life. And what they want is good schools, they want good transport, they want good roads, and they want affordable housing. And those are the things to focus on for the creative class, the same as for everybody else in the city.